lectures do we get in this class? 11. This is 5. So basically, we're halfway done with the class already. Does that feel like halfway? No, it goes very, very fast. And this is why I tell you guys, and again, this class is sort of a microcosm of your experience here at Full Sail. It's going to go fast. Classes are fast. Your 2 years here or your 4 years here are gonna go fast. So just remember, put everything you can into your classes, because before you know it, they'll be over and you don't want to miss anything. Does that make sense? It goes by quickly, so take advantage of it. You will not be surrounded by so many creative, fun people like yourself as you have here, and in your virtual environment as well. And you will not have so many very talented instructors who love what they do and love to share with you guys what they know as you have here. So make sure you're making excellent use of this time, because this is an environment unique to the world, and you will miss it very much when you're not here. So take best advantage while you are. And honestly, when I talk to people who graduated from here, they kind of say that thing one after another, but they miss this place. And yeah, the schedule is crazy. There's a lot of work to do. It's hectic as all get out, but you will miss it. This is definitely a unique place that we are all in right now. Okay, so again, lecture 5, almost halfway done with the class. And but today we're going to be talking about how to model smarter, not necessarily harder, because there's actually a point where if you're not getting enough sleep, you know, there's diminishing returns. You don't do better, you actually do worse. So what we're going to talk about is how we can speed up our workflow, some things that we can incorporate into our working and thinking process in order to expedite all of our modeling endeavors, so that maybe we can eke out a little bit more sleep than we were planning on. So that's going to be very helpful. We are also going to be delving into the concept of hierarchy today, and I think you're really going to find this fun, because it is an element of modeling, but it really has more to do with setup or rigging, the process of making the machine that makes the objects move properly. So it's kind of a cool concept, and it's sort of the baby steps of a whole other discipline. So it's very interesting. It's very different than modeling, but yet it is a job within 3D. So it's kind of cool building functionality into objects. So we're gonna be doing that today too. And that's a pretty fun one. And it's got a fun little skill check at the end of it too. It's probably one of the class favorites. So let's get into today's material without any further ado, and talk about this stuff, because it's fun and I like talking about this stuff. All right, but before we start, ding, a new vocabulary item: deleting history. Deleting history is very important. The fact that we wait till week 2 to show you is no indication of how important this is. What you need to understand about history is the fact that every time you do something in Maya, every little thing you do, Maya records it, it writes it down. It is part of that object's history. And you know, like a good machine, Maya records everything. And unfortunately, a buildup of history can lead to problems, because we're forcing Maya to remember too much stuff that's not important. And that can cause sort of a taxing of Maya's and your computer's resources. So something that we have to do periodically is sneeze and make sure we delete the history. And it's very important that we do this, again, because it eases the mental burden on Maya. And anytime we can make Maya's life easier, Maya will make our lives easier. So we definitely want to do that. And it's a very simple process, but it is often overlooked because it's kind of tedious. But something that I do every 15 minutes while I'm working is I will delete history, freeze transformations, and then resave my file. And it's just a workflow I've gotten myself into. And I can't tell you how many times that has saved me, literally and figuratively, from disaster. Because if you're saving every 15 minutes with a new name, don't save over the same file. You know, if you're building a car 1, 15 minutes later, car 2, car 3, and you go like that. If Maya crashes, something bad happens, you've only lost 15 minutes. If you work for 4 hours and the machine goes down, you lost 4 hours of work. Does that make sense? That is a catastrophic loss. So you don't want that to happen to you. So again, something that I build into my workflow is saving every 15 minutes, and I delete my history before I do so. And another crazy thing, not only does it cause Maya files to crash, not only does it cause renders to take forever or crash, also tools will start to not function anymore when you have too big of a buildup of history on your geometry. One of the first things I will ask, if a student tells me that their file's corrupted or something's broken or Maya's not working, the first thing I ask them is, have you restarted your computer recently? So just like we need sleep or we get crazy, if your laptop doesn't get to sleep, it goes crazy too. So you need to restart that thing at least every day. But the next question is there history on the geometry? Do you have a buildup? And typically, there's like 10 miles of it. So let's take a look at how do we delete the history. And you'll notice in terms of where you see the history, it's in the channel box. So you have to have the channel box open, but you'll see a list of everything you have done to any given object you select, the last thing being on the top. So again, that buildup of history is way more trouble than good. So let me just show you through example issues. Boop. So you can see I have my channel box open, and there is history on this object as soon as I create it, because that's part of its history. It was born, as it were. So that's the beginning. And then let's say I use my insert edge loop tool on it or whatever. You'll notice that as I put edge loops on this thing, you'll see, oh yeah, it's writing that stuff down, and it is a part of this object's history. Does that make sense? You can hell yeah on that? Yeah. Okay, good. So again, the issue here is we need to get rid of that periodically. It's a very simple process. Step one, select your geometry in object mode. Has to be in object mode, has to be selected. Go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. All you got to do. Press that, boom, all that history goes away, and it's like wiping the slate, right? Brand new relationship. All this piece of geometry is points in space, right? And that's what you want it to be. That's all geometry needs to be, points in space. That's it. So again, it's a simple process. Please do it. And obviously, since it is a periwinkle vocabulary thing, you know that that's going to appear on what document? That self-grade document, right? So therefore, part of your grade. So when we're talking about our week 2 turn-in, do you think this will be on it? For shizzle, it's going to be on there. So make sure you are deleting your history. Very important. Make sense? Yeah. Couldn't be easier also. It's like 2-3 clicks, you're done. So worthwhile. Yeah. Yes, you can. Absolutely. But what I do recommend is select each of those objects afterward and make sure it did it. Does that make sense? It would be wonderful if Maya was perfect. It would be wonderfully awful if people were perfect, but the reality is we are all flawed, both Maya as well as ourselves, and I double check everything. It's worth the extra second. Go ahead, Brian.
There's a question online. What is the difference between delete by type and delete all by type?
Well, delete all by type wipes out the history in the entire scene, which can be a little bit reckless because in some instances you're actually trying to bind geometry to a skeleton, and in that instance where you are skinning, you want history on your geometry. So if you do that, you ultimately end up disconnecting the geometry from the joints in question. So just to localize it more, we just do it like that because it's a good habit to get into. Later on, when you're feeling more comfortable and you feel like you're not going to make that mistake, you can think that far ahead, you can use whichever one you wish. That's not a big deal. Does that make sense?
It says, Steve, you're perfect.
No, not even close. Not even close. I try really hard. So if effort and tenacity is a judge, okay, I'd say I probably have, that. Perfection, never. But I appreciate the intended compliment. All right, so again, that deleting history, very important. Make sure we get that done. Again, we're grading for it, so make sure you do it. And you know what's really funny, Brian? I was talking to Paul, who teaches production modeling, which is like a million years into the future in terms of the classes for these guys. Yeah. And he's like, guys, how come you're not deleting history on your geometry? You learned that in 3DF. And they're like, we still have to do that? Yes. It's not like I teach it to you and then it doesn't matter anymore. Do you still use your alphabet?
No.
Yes, you do. Don't tell me that. You still use the alphabet, right? We still have to spell things. So the stuff you learn in here, you carry with you. You add that to your utility belt of skills, and you take that with you forever. All the geometry you model henceforth, you should be deleting the history on periodically. Again, once you're out of the modeling phase and you're into other elements of the production pipeline, okay, then maybe we do want history, maybe we don't. These things vary, and it's situationally dependent. So you just got to be aware. Where am I at? What's going on right now, and what do I need or not need? But realize that during the modeling process, history is not your friend, and you want to clear it whenever and wherever you can. Make sense? Hell yeah? Good. Again, it's pretty easy to overlook too. So make sure you don't let that happen. All right, so part of the modeling smarter, not harder, is the idea that before we even start modeling, we need to use our brainy parts and start analyzing the stuff we're trying to build. Any of you guys play chess at all? Any chess players? Just the three of us, right? All right. In terms of chess, it's a frustrating game. I get it. You know, it's much more fun to play bombardment, but let's just assume checkers. Checkers, I don't know. For me, never mind. I'm not going to go down that road. In terms of modeling smarter, not harder, what I need you to do is start looking at the objects and try to find things like elements of symmetry. So anything that exhibits bilateral symmetry, meaning what it looks like on one side, it looks like on the other side. Geometry patterns that can be repeated. What that means is you only have to actually build part of something, and then you can then utilize that to build the rest of the object. So again, the idea being in chess, if you can think a few moves ahead, you can move faster. Well, with modeling, it's the same kind of thing. If you can kind of envision in your head what it is you're going to do, sort of dissecting in your mind how you're going to approach any given model, you can use that information to help you model that object faster and more efficiently. So you can build just a portion of an object and then use that to build the rest of it, because it's super helpful to do that again and save you a ton of time. One of the tools that we can use to do that is the mirror tool. And the mirror tool is super cool because what it does is it takes a look at what you have on one side of an object, and it basically not only duplicates it, but it flips it to the other side like a mirror does, so that you could make a perfect duplicate of something on the other side. And you know, many objects exhibit bilateral symmetry. You know, most organisms on the planet Earth exhibit bilateral symmetry. There are some that don't, but most do. But inanimate objects, almost by default, exhibit bilateral symmetry, just because it's more efficient in terms of their production to make them so that they're similar on both sides, unless its function calls for it to be different on purpose. But otherwise, typically we build things very symmetrical, you know, because we're symmetrical, I don't know, but it's definitely an efficiency thing. So what's really nice is you can build just one half of something and then mirror it, and you'll have both. So what you need to do is take a look at objects and try to figure out, is there a line of symmetry somewhere on the object in question, and how can I use that to help me use the mirror tool and save me some work? So I've got a fun little activity for you. We've built a portion of a mailbox, and we're going to use the mirror tool in order to duplicate it and not have to do as much work, and we're going to get perfect copies of whatever we want. I don't like to use the word perfect often, but in this instance, that is what I'm talking about. All right, let's get rid of that. Let's set our projects to the activity file folder, because we love that thing. And we are going to open our, we've got a, yes, mirror geometry, duplicate, mirror geometry, whoop, mirror geometry, that's the one. So we open mirror geometry, and again, I've got a little piece of a mailbox here, and if you look at my reference image, you can see, you know, the object in question looks the same from one side to the other, and it actually looks the same from one side to the other in the front as well. So literally for this object, I only need 1/4 of it, and I can build the rest. Now it's true the front of the mailbox and the back of the mailbox are a little bit different, but I can build just part of it, mirror it, and then add the details to the areas that are different. and it will still do most of the work for me, which is super cool. For this demonstration, I'm actually going to hide my image planes for a second by going to my show menu and unchecking image planes, because I don't really need those at this point, but I wanted you to see that object. All right, now in terms of the mirror tool, it's under mesh, and you will see the mirror tool. And the most important thing about the use of the mirror tool is figuring out what axis your geometry is on and what axis are you trying to mirror the geometry onto. So this is the key thing. Now, when I'm looking at this piece of geometry, it currently exists in positive Z. Now I know it's Z because the arrow is blue, right? So this is where my geometry is. That's that imaginary line that divides my scene in half, right? So my geometry is in Z because that's where the blue arrow is, meaning Z. But I also know it's positive because this is the side the arrow is on, right? So if it is in positive Z, if I want to take this and flip it to the other side, where am I sending it? Negative Z, right? So that's what we have to realize when we are doing the mirror tool. So the steps for using the mirror tool is 1, we select the geometry in object mode. Got to be selected, got to be object mode. And we go to mesh, mirror, and we go to the options box. And here's where we tell it we want to mirror into Z. And specifically, you know, do we want positive or negative? So we want to go to negative Z. Does that make sense? And we would like to attach it to the original. And that's all about making sure that they actually connect. Because sometimes you want to mirror something, but you don't necessarily want it to connect. So something to bear in mind. I do want these to connect. So when I hit apply, it mirrors it from one side to the other instantly. Watch this. Boop, 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 boop. Right? It's like magic. Okay? Now I'm hoping, oh yay! All right. I got a little bit of an issue here, and I just want to show you. This is what it looked like before I mirrored it. And here's what it looked like after I mirrored it. Before, after. Before, after. It doesn't look right, Brian. What do you guys think happened? What went amok? Because it looks a little different. And you guys have any guesses or thoughts? This is the interactive part of the program. My digital friends, anything? The local class is speechless. Oh, vertices on top of each other, merge, all excellent questions. I asked the vertices to merge when I took the two pieces and attached them together, right? But it looks like there's some pinching going on there. Tell me, what's the most important aspect of merge? We talked about that last class. Threshold is the single most important aspect of the merge, right? So when I look at this tool, or when I look at this result, I can see, wow, it kind of pinched together. That's not what I wanted. Well, here's an interesting thing. If I select the object, I see in its object's history a poly mirror. This is where I mirrored it, right? If I click on that with the left mouse button, I see the attributes of the mirror. And if I scoot down through here, through all this fun stuff, look what's in there. What's that? Merge threshold. And I got a merge threshold of 3.362. That's kind of big, right? What did we say we want things to merge at if we only want the vertices that are right on top of each other to merge? 0.01 or 0.001, right? So if I'm going to change my merge to 0.01, look what happened. So are there instances where going back in history and changing what happened, is that to your advantage? Yeah, sometimes history is helpful. Does that make sense? So I don't want you to think history is always bad, but periodically we do need to clear it. But here's an instance where history actually helped us out. Does that make sense? You go back in time and kill Sarah Connor, machines rule the universe. Go machines. I just want to be on the winning side. Oh no, wait, the good guys won. Did the people win or the machines win that time? Well, there's different ways to merge, absolutely. Absolutely, but what I was trying to demonstrate for you is the fact that sometimes history is actually advantageous, sometimes not. But does that make sense? That was an instance where history was a good thing. I could go back in time and change something, right? But most of the time it's not helpful. Most of the time it causes problems, and that's why we edit, delete by type history. Nice and clean. All right? Now, I'm not going to tell you the answer to this one. You got to tell me, which axis is my geometry in? And don't get caught up in left, right, center, right? Because left isn't always this and right isn't always that. You have to look at the arrows and decide, what axis is my geometry in? It is in X because, again, that imaginary line down the middle, it's on this side. The arrow is red, so it is definitely X. And because this is the side where the arrow is, it's positive for sure. Does that make sense? So when I want to mirror this piece of geometry, where am I sending it? Anybody? Don't be shy. Negative X, absolutely. I'm going to send it into negative X. So I select the geometry. I go to mesh, mirror, and I'm going to send it into X using the negative axis, mirror, and that sends it across. And now, with like just a few clicks, I got that whole mailbox. I don't even have to worry about modeling all those details. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, there's a skeptical hell yeah, but I'll take it. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's all right. What's your question? The first time we mirrored, we went into negative Z, and the second time we mirrored, we went into negative X.
Yeah, but like the one we had was positive, right? DC was positive. So
yeah.
Where was that one positive?
Because that's where the arrow was. If you take a look at the piece of geometry, positive X, because that's the side where the arrow is. This is negative Z where we're going, but it's in positive Z. And the mistake a lot of students make is they assume right is always this, that left is always that. That's all perspective, because this is my right hand. This is also my right hand. Does that make sense? So don't get caught up in left is always this, right is always that, because that's not true. We work in a 3D world, and it really has to do with where are we standing relative to what we're looking at that determines axes. And that's why I tell you, let go of what you think you know about where things are. Look at what the arrows are telling you, and look at what the world axis indicator is telling you, and go by that. Does that make sense? It's like trying to fly a plane with instrumentation. You know, if you're in heavy cloud cover, you can't see. Don't guess. Look at the instruments and do what they are telling you logically to do, and you're going to be fine. Does that make sense? Don't try to make stuff up because you're going to get yourself into trouble. Go with the absolutes because those are the truths. Sorry, that was an obscure reference. I don't know how many of you actually fly a plane. How many of you guys fly planes? Okay, I didn't think so. Me neither. Like I can afford a plane. I can't afford my car. Go ahead. It's under mesh. Go to the options box. Make sure you go to the word mirror and go way right to the box at the end.
I'm going and it's like just take me out of the drop-down menu and nothing
It's like mirror geometry, right?
Mine just says mirror, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Geometry.
Yeah, hit the options box. Have you restarted your machine recently?
Yeah, today.
Try restarting it and just see if that helps, because I think that will make a difference. Because that menu should pop up when you click the options box. And that's usually a good indication that, yeah, I probably need to restart at least Maya, maybe my laptop. So that's when weird stuff happens. All right. So let's take a quick look. whoop, at some more fun tools. Now, this tool we're going to learn is called the Duplicate with Transform tool. And it's really fun because basically not only does it duplicate objects, but it also incorporates the movement. So what I'd like you to think of is Maya is not only duplicating an object, but it's recording movement, like record, stop, which is kind of cool. So what happens is you can build something and move it, and Maya will remember not only the object and duplicate it, but it will also remember the movement as well. Now, where would that come in handy? Could you imagine modeling a single spoke for a bicycle, right? You can make one spoke for a bicycle. That's not that complicated. But if you think about how many spokes go in the entire wheel, and you know that they are perfectly offset from each other so that they're all exactly the same space apart, that would be really difficult to duplicate. Does that make sense? Literally and figuratively. Because if one of those things is out of place, your attention is going to be drawn to it immediately. So what if I can build one spoke and then turn it a little bit and make another duplicate of it, and then Maya will continue to make duplicates and space all of them perfectly from each other so it looks like a machine made it, because the machine did. Does that make sense? This is where this tool comes in super handy. Also think of links on a tank tread. You know, you build one link, duplicate it and move it into position, and then you can continue to duplicate and make a whole bunch of them, and they will all fit together perfectly, spaced just like they should be with that level of precision. So this is where this Duplicate with Transform tool works super fun. Now, in terms of the Duplicate with Transform, of course, we have an exercise for it. But these are the numbers I want you to remember because we're going to have to enter these. For translate X, 0.3. For translate Y, also 0.3. And then for rotate Y, 7 degrees. So 0.3, 0.3, and 7 degrees. So let's open up that activity. I'm going to go back to Maya, and I'm going to open up my, what did I call that one? Oh, that must be what it is. My Duplicate with Transform. Okay. Now, in terms of Duplicate with Transform, I've given you one step. That's all we have, one. And this is how we use the tool in terms of its function. First, select a piece of geometry, and then you go to Edit, and you'll see Duplicate with Transform. Click. Now, there's two steps now right on top of each other, because that's how duplication works, right? Same way. And you'll notice that now it says step 2 in the channel box. So I'm no longer holding step 1, I'm holding step 2, the new duplicate. And at this exact juncture in time, Maya is now recording all of the movement that I do. So you don't want to click off into space, you don't want to click on something else and then click back. You have to stay selected on the object that you just duplicated with the transform. Does that make sense? Because if you let go of it at any point, that's going to wreak havoc with Maya remembering what you're doing. So Maya is now recording to see what I do. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to move my object back a tiny bit. You guys remember what my translate X value was? 0.3, right? So now it moved back 0.3 grid units. Now I want to move it up just a little bit. And you'll notice I hit enter after I plug in a value. Enter. All right, so now I go to my Y value. What was my value there? 0.3 also. So I plug in 0.3, enter, and that moves it up a tiny bit, right? Now, I also wanted to rotate it on the Y-axis. How many degrees did I do? 7. So I hit 7 and I hit enter. Enter after every one of these things. I still haven't let go, right? Still have a hold of it. Now, what's cool about this is Maya has a key that allows you to repeat things. So it's almost like I just threw a rock and I want to throw another one, and I want to throw another one, I want to throw another one. So it's like a repetition thing. Now in Maya, we can do repetition with the G key, as in George. And any tool or any action that is a repeatable tool or action, Maya will do again for you when you press G. So I've just created a new step and I've moved it into position, and I want to make a whole bunch of them that incorporate each of those moves into what it's doing. So I can just hit my G key and it will make the next step and turn it a little bit. G, G, G. And as long as I hit G, it's going to keep making those steps and keep spinning them around in space. All right? Woo! And I can make a spiral staircase in no time at all with perfect precision in terms of the placement of each of those steps. Super easy. All right? Now, you might be thinking, okay, that was pretty cool, but you knew all the numbers you were working with. You plugged in 0.3, 0.3, and 7 degrees. Well, what if I don't know any of that? You know, is that going to hinder my ability to use this tool and this function? And the answer to that is no, absolutely not, because you can select the object, edit, duplicate with transform, move it a little bit, move it a little bit, put some rotation on it, spin it on this axis too, and then hit your G key, and it's going to keep doing it. So even if you don't know the values specifically, you can still get that tool to work and create, you know, all kinds of crazy looking designs, again, very quickly and easily, using that G key in conjunction with that translate. Now, again, it's a touch thing. So, you know, sometimes it doesn't work the first time you try it, but realize that typically what happens is people like hit duplicate with transform, and then they click off of the object, and they click out into space somewhere, and then they click back on it, and they're hoping Maya remembers everything, and it typically does not work that way. But you will get the hang of it. It's not that bad, and it is quite a helpful tool. It's not one of those tools you use all the time, but when you need it, it can really save you some time. So that's a good one to know. All right, we good with duplicate with transform? Hell yeah? All right, cool. My digital friends, they on board, Brian? Oohs and ahs. Oh, good. I'm glad. All right, let's talk a little bit about poly count. This is a term that comes up a lot, and it can be somewhat confusing, so I just want to clarify for you poly count. What does it mean, and what's its purpose? We love to measure things. We love to quantify things as human beings, as long as there's a base 10 involved. We like to add stuff up, and you know, miles an hour, quarts, gallons, gigawatts, you know, we've got a measurement for everything. So how do we figure out how to measure a polygon object when it doesn't really exist? It's the points in space inside of the computer. The way we do that is we literally count the number of faces that it takes to build that object. That's that object's level of complexity. So for example, you might be working on a project and your lead will say, hey, listen, I need you to build me Ahsoka's lightsaber out of polygons, and you can't go over 500 polys. So make sure you build this thing with as much detail as you can, but don't go over 500. And you have to think of that poly budget as that's the ceiling, and you want to get as close as you can to that number without going over, because if it goes over, literally the game engine won't be able to calculate the geometry fast enough, and the game won't run, or it'll have a severe lag in it. So you got to make sure you stay within those budget limits, because the entire scene has a maximum, and it can't go over that when you're talking about games. Does that make sense? Okay, so how do I figure out how many polys I have, because I hate trying to count polygons? Well, the good news is Maya can count it for you. If you go to display, heads up display, poly count, Maya will actually put the numbers on the screen for you, so you'll know how many polygons any object has. So you'll have a row for how many polys in the entire scene, how many selected, and how many visible is how you get these different rows of numbers. And the numbers you're looking for is faces. So this object has 489 faces, so that's its poly count. Does that make sense? Okay. So it's just how we measure stuff. And it all has to do with the requirements of your assignment. Technical things. All right. Let's talk a little bit, another vocabulary element, pivot points. Pivot points affect the functionality of objects. That's what they do. If something's got to move, where its pivot point is affects the way it moves. For example, if you look at these doors to the room that we came into, and you guys can do this at home. Well, you can't see our doors, but you can see your doors. If you look at the doors for the room, which way do you think these doors open? Just looking at them. Do they open outward or do they open inward? Outward for the classroom? No idea at your house, but I'm guessing probably outward from where you're sitting, most likely. Now, it's true, this is a public gathering place, right? There's lots of people in here, so doors have to open outward. It's an OSHA standard for safety, so that if there's an event or emergency of some kind, we can all get out safely. But I know these doors open outward because I can't see the hinges. Because the way doors work is they pivot on the hinges. So if the hinges are on the outside, that's the way the door opens as well. They physically cannot open the other direction. Does that make sense? So that pivot point becomes very important. Where's the pivot point? Because that will affect the functionality of the door. So what we're going to do is talk about how to incorporate the pivot points on objects and how to move them around. And this is going to be, because you know this is a vocabulary thing, you know this is something we're grading on. Because what we are going to do is build physicality into the models that we have, right? We're going to make them so that they work. So objects are built of many pieces. The first thing we need to do is work out where do they pivot from, because that needs to be correct in order for them to function. So let's take a look at a fun little exercise here that will help us with figuring out the pivot points on objects. So I know many of you have been like, how do I get all these pieces to move together properly? How do I get them to function as they should? We're going to get into that shortly, but first we have to talk about pivot. Then we get into the functionality as well. So first is pivot. So back to our activity file folder. File open scene, and I want my hierarchy activity. Open that guy up. No need to save that. Okay, so with my hierarchy activity, you'll see I've got two doors in here. One of them is kind of a cool fancy door, and this one's kind of a simple door. Now, when I click my move tool or my rotate tool or scale tool, you know, they all give me a pivot point in the center of the object. By default, if you select an object or objects, Maya will put the pivot point somewhere in the middle. That's what it does. So since the pivot point for this simple object, we're going to call it a door, is right in the middle, when I rotate it, you will notice that it rotates around a pivot point in the center, right? That's how it's moving, right? And we do have doors that work like that, right? You can go to the mall or, you know, some stores in New York City, they all pivot in the middle like this. And there's always some kid who like stops partway through and you can't get out. Oh, also secret doors in all of your favorite Scooby-Doo episodes, they spin like that too. But that's not working for me. I want this to work like a regular door. So what I'm going to have to do is edit the pivot point. Now, if I try to move the pivot point normally, the object goes with it. The pivot point travels with the object, or the object travels with the pivot point. But if I want to move the pivot point without moving the object, I have to go into what we call edit pivot point mode. Now, the way we do that is if you look at your keyboard, you see the letter D, as in David. If you press the D key, we go into what we call edit pivot point mode, and we can actually move the pivot. Be very, very careful. Do not touch the rotate capacity of this tool, because that will change the rotation points as well. We don't want to move that. We only want to move the arrows, so make sure you're grabbing out here. But I can move my pivot point, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my orthographic views, because that's going to add to my ability to do that in a more precise manner. And I'm going to go to my top view as well, and I'm going to move that pivot point so that it's right at the corner of my door, right? Then I have to get out of pivot point mode, so I press D again. So now, when I select this door, forevermore, that's its pivot point. So when I go to my rotate tool and I rotate it, now it's swinging totally differently. Now it's moving like a regular door. It's pivoting from over there. All right? You guys able to do that? Was that working? You got that going? How about my digital buddies? How are you guys doing with that? Tony said no. No, I don't want to do it, or no, it's not working.
No, it's not working.
Okay. Make sure you select the object in object mode and hit D on your keyboard as in David and grab the arrows to move it. Don't grab anything else, just the arrows. Grab like the points. I know it's pointy and people tell you not to grab the sharp parts, but in this instance, that is what you want to do.
Elizabeth got it working.
Good. Elizabeth, you help out. Exactly. All right. So we're able to move that pivot point. So here is the part where I give you a mini assignment to do, and you've got to figure it out. So use your brainy parts. And here is the conundrum. We have a special door here, right? It goes to a safe, and it has some parts that move, and we need to make sure they move properly because right now they're not set up properly. Number one, this door has hinges. Is it pivoting on its hinges right now? Yet, right? That's not even close. So we need to fix that pivot point because that's wrong. Number two, this locking mechanism, right? If I use its pivot point, is that the way that's supposed to move? No, that should spin in place, right? It's not spinning in place. It's like going around like it's on a clock or something. So that's not right either. Right there, that locking mechanism. And if I grab this piece right here and I try to move it, this handle, right? Is that moving the way you would expect it to? No, that's not right either, right? So all kinds of things have the wrong pivot points. So what I want you to do is edit the pivot point of the door, edit the pivot point of the locking mechanism, and edit the pivot point of the handle so that they all move and pivot as they should. Now, they won't move together yet. We're going to talk about that next, but it is important to set up the pivot points first, and then we're going to get into making them move together. And then both of those things will work together and we'll have full functionality, but we do pivots first. So set this up, door, locking mechanism, and handle, and then we will adjust those pivot points, or then we'll work on making them move together. But Brian and I will walk around real quick and make sure you guys are having success with this part of it, and then we'll delve into the other stuff.
So I figured it out.
Oh yeah? All right.
I'm running 2016.
Oh,
2018. Because this
yeah.
is what they gave us in game design.
Oh, I got you. All right. Well, I'm sorry that was confusing for you, but we're just trying to keep it interesting.
Angry Google searches help every time.
There you go. Good. I see everybody's moving the pivot points around. And remember, you want to move the pivot points of the objects one at a time. I know you're thinking, oh, I can grab everything and move them all at once. That's actually counterproductive. You want to move the pivot points one at a time. So don't try to cut corners. You're actually complicating things by doing that. So try to do those things one at a time, and you'll be just fine. Make sure next time you come in late, come see me as soon as you come in, okay? I saw you today because we got a small enough class, but make sure. All right, how we all doing? Good, good? Cool, how are you guys doing? The front row peeps. Good? Okay, good. Excellent. All right, so it's looking pretty good. In terms of setting up the pivot points, it looks like you guys are getting the gist of this. Again, that moving the pivot point without moving the object, very, very helpful in terms of affecting the functionality. So for me, you know, when I'm moving that pivot point, I go into edit pivot point mode. I'm going to scoot that thing over, and I'm going to use more than one view. It's always a good idea to use more than one because that's going to help you out so much with the accuracy of the placement of things. So usually a good idea to do that. And again, try to not grab the rotate capacity because you can throw off the way it rotates. You can put a little bit of a wobble in your object if you accidentally do that. So just be very aware of that. Just use your arrows. All right, there we go. All right, and then this stuff should be moving just fine. All right, let's get back to hierarchy. So now we got to talk about making stuff move. Don't lose this file, leave it like it is because we're going to go back to it in a second. But what I want you to understand is the concept of hierarchy and how this affects movement of things. Now, the way hierarchy works is kind of, well, it is the way its name describes. We're talking about a hierarchy or a chain of command. So think of it, you know, like a family tree. There's a hierarchy in place, right? Grandparents tell the parents what to do, parents tell the kids what to do, the oldest kid tells the younger kids what to do. There's sort of a hierarchy or a chain of command, and whoever is at the bottom always gets the worst of it. So that is the way that works. And in terms of that hierarchy, what makes it work is there has to be, first off, a clear hierarchy, right? If you don't believe somebody's in charge of you, then that's a problem because you're not going to do what they say. So there has to be a clear hierarchy that works, and you need to get one set of instructions. So as long as you have those two criteria, you can have a functioning hierarchy. So the idea is, for example, if your mom tells you to mow the lawn and your dad tells you to wash the car, you know, they're both in the hierarchy above you, but those are conflicting instructions, so you can't really do it. So what we need to have is a clear hierarchy. You know, actually, mom's in charge and tells dad what to do, and so okay, I'm going to go do what she said first. So point is, you have to have a hierarchy in place and one set of instructions, and then everything works fine. So we have a chain of command that we have to set up within Maya. Now, the way we do that is using what we call nodes. And Maya is basically a node-based application. And what that means is, well, how many of you guys have used Photoshop before? Okay, a couple of you use Photoshop, that's good. Photoshop is a layer-based application. So what that means is you have a whole bunch of layers, and they're like pieces of paper, and you draw on each piece of paper. But what's cool is you can take those pieces of paper and put them on top of each other, and then the papers affect each other. You know, sometimes you can see through them, sometimes they multiply against each other and drop stuff out, or there's different things you can do. But these layers are meant to be viewed sort of from above. You're looking down on it. So that's a very linear type application. Does that make sense? That's a linear one. Maya is a node-based application. So what that means is it's not linear in its process. It actually goes in all directions at once. You can build on top of things in any direction with nodes. So think of it more like Legos or Tinker Toys, because you can literally go in any direction with it. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay. So we've got these nodes, which are icons that represent everything in Maya. And there's usually a little picture that accompanies it. That's the picture for geometry. So if you see that, you know that this node represents a piece of geometry. And you can see how they kind of connect to each other. And it gives you a view of the hierarchy or the chain of command that takes place between those objects. And then that's how you govern movement. Who tells who what to do, basically. And then that governs movement or functionality. So in terms of those nodes, let me get Maya going here. Oops, I want this one. All right, let me get a new scene. If you, well, appreciate your playing, but we're already playing with this other Maya. When you create objects, They are also listed in the a particular window that actually shows you the nodes. If you go to Windows, General Editors, Hypergraph Hierarchy, you will open a window in Maya that shows you the nodes associated with any given scene that you happen to be in. And this is an orthographic window, so like all orthographic windows, you can track or dolly, you can zoom in or out, but you can't tumble because there's no 3D component to it. So, but this is a node for this particular object, the cube. You can select the object in here and it lights up in there, or you can select it in here and it lights up out there. Just like all my windows in Maya, they show you the same thing just from a different sort of perspective, literally. So in terms of objects and selection, we're going to have to get into, again, using our powers of observation. And I want you to, I'm going to hide my grid for a second. I want to show you some functionality here. Now, you'll notice when I select an object, its name loads into the channel box, right? Tells us the name of the object. And if I select an object, it turns green. If I select two objects, how does Maya list the object? One is green and one is white, so that's different. Exactly, that's selection order. We're going to talk about that. But also, what does it say in the channel box? pSphere1 ... That ... is an indication of more than one thing is selected. It just doesn't list them all. Does that make sense? Okay, now, if you look at the movement of these two objects when I select them, and I could either select one, hold shift and select the other, or I could marquee style select, it doesn't make any difference. When I move them, they do move together, but watch what happens when I rotate them. All right, they move in the rotation at exactly the same time, but they seem to have their own sense of self. There's an individuality there. They are turning on their own pivot point. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if I have several objects in Maya, let's say I've got a cylinder, a sphere, and a cube, whatever object I select last will be green, and that's the selection order. That lets me know what's the last thing I grabbed. The others will be white. Okay? And again, when you grab multiple objects, only one of them gets credit. Everybody else is just ... Does that make sense? And if I look at that at the hypergraph hierarchy, here's those objects all selected. Okay? Now, let's take a look at ways to change the way these guys relate and ways to change how they move. The first thing I'm going to do is group these objects. Now, in our world, when we talk about grouping, we're typically thinking visually when we group things. You know, these are fast cars, these are vacation spots I'd like to go, these are kinds of pizza that I like. You know, I'm kind of grouping things like that. It's an organizational thing. With Maya, grouping is actually physical, but it's kind of complicated because you can't see it. It's physical, but it's invisible. How the heck does that happen? So what I'd like you to do is think of grouping as like the creation of an invisible box. So let's say I want this remote and my phone to move together. So what I do is I take them and I create a group of them. And what happens is these objects can move in the group. It's not like they're stuck. But as soon as I pick up the box that they're in, they have to go with it. So wherever I go with that box, they have to go. But they can move within the box all they want, but the box is obviously in charge and makes them go. Does that make sense? Okay, so they move within the box, but the box moves. So this is the way we group things. If you select one object, shift select the other, or marquee, it really doesn't matter. You go to edit and you choose group. All right. Now, things are a little bit different now. How does this look different? Somebody tell me one of the things, because there's a couple. Yeah, the tool is kind of big, but that's because I have it set for that. Like, I can make that whatever size I want.
They're both primary selected, they're both green.
They're both green, right? One's not green and one's not white. So that's definitely different. Does that make sense? Okay. What's the second thing that's different? Channel box. Does it mention cube or sphere? No, group 1. Right? That's it. And the pivot point, let's look at where that is. Where's the pivot point for these things? It's at the origin, somewhere else. Does that make sense? So let's look at the behavior when we rotate it, right? Here's rotation. Again, movement is the same. That's not any different, translation. But when we rotate, do they have a sense of self? No, they're doing something else's bidding. Does that make sense? They have to move. And again, it's true. I can grab this one and I can move it. I can grab this one and I can move it. But once I go to the group, they are both absolutely under the control of the group. Does that make sense? All right, now let's take a look at what that looks like in the hypergraph hierarchy. All right, so here's the hypergraph hierarchy. Right, looking at the window.
How is it that you selected?
I'm going to show you that. Now, you can see there's the group node, and it is in charge of both the sphere and the cube. All right, so here's the node for the sphere, here's the node for the cube, and there's the group that's in charge. And what's interesting is you'll notice in the hypergraph hierarchy, they behave the same way as they do out here. Now, both of these objects are lit. Are they actually selected? No. The group is, right? We know it turns yellow when it's selected, but they look like they're selected because they're highlight green, which we associate with you've been selected, right? Well, here's the thing. If you select an object, if there are any objects in its hierarchy, things that it's in charge of, they will light up as though they're selected, but they're not. What we are showing you is the fact that these objects must do what the selected object says. Does that make sense? It's a visual cue of the hierarchy that exists. And again, this node can move on its own, this node can move on its own, just like these objects can move on their own. But as soon as you select the group, they must do what the group says. Now, can you take objects out of a hierarchy? Absolutely. If you hold down the middle mouse button, you get the green plus of power. And you can drag off into space and let go, and that literally disconnects a node. So these guys are moving together, just like these guys are moving together, but the sphere is no longer part of that group. But again, if I hold down the green plus of power, I can drag this node to that one, and now it's been reconnected again. So when I grab the group, they all go together. When I grab the group, they all go together. Does that make sense? I can see the hierarchy. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay. Now, you can delete objects within a group, no problem. If you select whatever is in charge and you delete it, everything that it's in charge of is also deleted. All right? So be careful of that. That happens sometimes. All right? So that's grouping, the group node. Here's another idea. This is called, in terms of making things move together, in terms of hierarchy, it's called parenting. And as you would imagine by its name, parenting, we're establishing a relationship between objects. One of them is the parent, and the other one's the child. Parent tells the child what to do, child does it. So, in a parent-child relationship, and this is the important part of that, you always select the child first. Does that make sense? Always select the child first in a parent-child relationship. So if I want the cube to be in charge of the sphere, cube tells the sphere what to do, I grab the sphere first, I hold shift and select what will be the parent or the one that decides the movement. And then I go to edit and I choose parent. And this is a different relationship. Again, in terms of its behavior, the sphere moves on its own, that's fine. But when I select the cube, the sphere also lights up. And then wherever I go with the cube, the sphere must go. You'll notice they both light up, they're both green. In the channel box, who gets credit? Cube, just the parent, right? No dot, 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 none of that, right? If I look at my hypergraph hierarchy, you can see that the sphere is connected to the cube. The cube is in charge. The sphere is not really selected, but it looks that way because of hierarchy. So, because there's a parent-child relationship here, the child can move on its own. I want ice cream, buy me a transformer. And the parent says, we are out of here. And they have to go. Does that make sense? And again, you can get rid of something in a parent-child relationship, but if you get rid of the parent, they're both gone. Does that make sense? Parenting versus grouping. They're different ways to make stuff move together. Establishing a relationship between objects, hierarchy, chain of command. So if we go back to our previous exercise, go to our hierarchy, right? Ooh, oh no, I got my step there. Duplicate with transforms, there's my hierarchy. So if I go to my hierarchy exercise and I want my door to move and I want the locking mechanism and the handle to move with it, I have a couple of different options on how to do that, right? What would be one of them? What could I do? Okay, which objects would I select? Right, and then go to edit, parent, all right. And what about this locking mechanism here? What would that do? Right, because right now if I grab the door, the handle moves, right? The handle's moving with it, but the pivot point's not there at the moment. Because the key here is I want to be able to move the door by swinging it, but then when I grab this piece, that moves like it's supposed to still. Does that make sense? So I have to have that hierarchy in place. I could also utilize grouping, also a viable solution. There's no right or wrong, it's just whatever's easiest or replicates the motion you're trying to create. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a problem solving. You got to find a way to make it work. And literally that is a discipline on the CG production pipeline. There are people whose job it is to build the machine that makes stuff move properly. And it's about pivot points and hierarchy and creating a series of controls that enable you to be able to animate something. So it's an important part of the pipeline. It is a creative process. It is an art-driven process. It is definitely a problem-solving process. But you know, some people, it's not the easiest discipline. Some people really like it. You know, if you're the kind of person who likes to fix things, you know, if your toaster breaks and your first thought is, where's my Phillips head screwdriver? You know, you might actually be into rigging or setup, because that whole job is finding ways to make stuff work and move properly. Go ahead. Yeah, you could do it from the hypergraph. I know people who use just the hypergraph hierarchy window. I know people who just use the main interface. I know people who use just the outliner, because it does the same thing. You can set up hierarchies using the outliner. It's just whatever makes sense to you. I show you guys the hypergraph hierarchy just because it's got these big hunkin' nodes for you to look at, and it's a little easier to see hierarchy there. You know what I mean? And I think for me, using a family tree as a reference, that makes more sense. So just visually, it's a little more easily understood. You know what I mean? So that's why I use that. But those are all windows that do the same thing.
How is it that you pull up the hypergraph hierarchy window?
If you go to Windows, General Editors, Hypergraph Hierarchy. Yep, and you navigate it just like any other orthographic window. Something to be aware of though, if you don't see anything, press F for frame. That works in the hypergraph hierarchy like any other window, so that'll bring your nodes into view. And if you're trying to move a node and it won't move, if you look over here, there's a little toggle switch that goes between freeform and locked layout. So if you click it to where they look unstacked, then you can actually move things with your left mouse button. If they look stacked like pancakes, it won't let you. So just make sure you unlock it to move it around. But you can create hierarchies within hierarchies. And all of this will affect movement. Now you might be wondering, well, how does this, okay, hierarchies, how does this affect movement? How does that happen? Well, if you look, for animation, if you look at a human being, right? When I'm moving my shoulder, my elbow and my wrist are also moving, right? My shoulder is rotating and they have to move. When I move my elbow, my wrist has to move. So obviously, my shoulder's telling my elbow what to do and my elbow's telling my wrist what to do. Does that make sense? There's a chain of command right there. If I move, right, my hips are going this way. Can my spine go the other way? No. So where my hips go, my spine has to go. If my spine's going this way, can my arms go the other way? Just once, right? So my spine's going this way. Guess what? My arms are going this way too. So what's happening is our whole body functions off of a hierarchy system. Does that make sense? That's how we move. So that's how we can build a chain of command or a skeleton to make stuff move. Now, with that in mind, again, well, we did the door thing, but with that in mind, we have this really fun skill check for you guys that I think you're going to enjoy. We are going to set up a hierarchy on a vehicle, Gesundheit. People usually do 3. You got one more? I bet you do. We'll see. Anyway, so we've got this cool hierarchy assignment that I think you're going to enjoy. It's a lot of fun. It's a skill check. Obviously, we're showing off what we learned today, so we have to set our project to our skill check file folder in order to access it. But the skill check, we get Maya up and running. Oh, wrong one. Want this one? So I'm going to file, and I'm going to set my project to my skill check file folder. File, open scene, and I got my hierarchy project. Open that up. Okay, and what we have is a bus. And the problem is the wheels on the bus go round and round, but they don't follow the bus all over town. So what we have to do is set up a hierarchy to get the bus and the wheels to work together. And the important part is you have to figure out, what do I need it to do? You know, we're always asking ourselves this question. I want to be able to grab the bus and bring the bus wherever I want to, and the wheels will go with it, but the wheels will still pivot on their own pivot points. So I could select the wheel, select the bus, and go to Edit, Parent. So now when I select the bus, if I take the bus around town, the wheel goes with it, but the wheel still has the ability to turn. Does that make sense? I could have also grouped it if I wanted to. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, in terms of the wheels, if I wanted to continue to use this parent-child thing, I can select, the way parent-child works, I can select as many things as I want. But the last thing I select will be the parent of all the other things. So whatever's the daddy, you got to pick last. You go Edit, Parent. And then now when I grab the bus, the wheels on the bus go round and round, and the bus goes all over town. All right? So here's where it gets interesting. This is where hierarchy is going to get fun. You'll notice it's got a little layer here. If you click the visibility, you will see the zombie kill bus accessories. And the zombie kill bus comes with really cool spikes for knocking down zombies that are shambling alongside your bus. We've got some heavy armor plating on the windows so they can't get through the glass. Depending on the movie you saw, some of them can't get through glass and some of them can with a strategic headbutt. So you need to have some glass on or armor on there to keep the zombies out. That's no fun when they get in the car with you. We also have this really cool buzzsaw action here. We've got this little swing arm on the front that raises and lowers these blades so that we can chop up both tall and short zombies with equal zeal. Now the problem here is we have to set up a hierarchy because right now, if the bus takes off, we're basically zombie breakfast buffet on wheels. So this is not good. So we want all these cool accessories to travel with the bus. And we can parent them or we can group them, whatever you want to do to make these pieces work. But we need to make them work together so that when I grab the bus, everything goes. So you have to find the solution for that. Now, in terms of the objects, we have already determined that the important thing for us to do first is work out the pivot points, right? Hierarchy is important in terms of its movement, but we need to do the pivot points first before we do hierarchy. So in terms of these armor plates, if they swing open or close, where do they swing from? Do they swing from the top? Do they swing from the sides? Is this pivot point fine? This is what we have to decide, all right? This swing arm here that controls the blades, is that an acceptable position for that to be in to function properly? What do you think? Will that work where it is right now? Does that look right? No, that's not going to work. So we adjust pivot points first, and then we establish hierarchy, and we're going to make a fully functional zombie kill bus. So again, it's up to you. You can do whatever you like in terms of your hierarchy process, but you want to build this zombie kill bus so that it works. You want it to be functional so that you can mow down zombies. All right. Now, for those of you guys who are wondering, well, what does this discipline look like? Well, you know, what are the next steps in this hierarchy, chain of command kind of thing? And I can show you some files of some objects. There we go. And just to, again, to give you an idea, you know, here's a character, right? And if you hide the polygons, right? I'm going to go to my show menu and uncheck my polygons. You can see the skeleton underneath, and the skeleton is based on a chain of command, just like I was showing you before in terms of shoulders controlling elbows and elbows controlling wrists. So what you can do is you can set up a hierarchy that will enable your character to move. And again, the idea is we bind the geometry to the skeleton using history, so it's got to be on there. But what that enables you to do is make the character move around, right? You can make them you can make them dance for inspiration, right? And we can make really fun controls, right, for our characters, like this control for the eyes. And we can make controls in order to allow us to talk. La, 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 la. Right? And we can make controls for our hands. Right? Oh, that's a lot of controls, yes. Right? You can't punch anybody in the mouth if you can't make a fist, so that's important. Right? And all of these controls allow you to animate a character, so you can build the control. And that's what it allows the character to be, or object to be, animated. So again, this setup or rigging process gives you that ability. And in case you were curious, here's the hypergraph hierarchy. For that character. So it is fair, it's medium complexity, but it's all built off of that idea of who's in charge, hierarchy, chain of command, and all of that governs the way this thing moves. So you can literally bring something to life and make it so that it can be animated based on the controls you build for it. Does that make sense? And that, again, that's a whole discipline. There are people who just do that every day. Build skeletons that make things move, whether it's a person or an object. They need controls. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, cool. So again, I want you to get that zombie kill bus all connected up and make all those parts move, make it all function. And actually, next assignment you're gonna like also, but I'm not gonna tell you what that is. But it's fun, and it's gonna incorporate the zombie kill bus also. But so get that thing set up, and then we'll talk about more fun stuff on Saturday. It will be good. Don't forget, Saturday, remember, is a virtual lecture. We're not gonna be in here. We're gonna be meeting in the virtual world, right? We are meeting in the virtual world. Sting, thank you very much. And that's at 8, so not at the usual 3 to 5 slot. So I actually like having the lectures earlier because that gives you more of the day to actually get some work done. When they're too late, I think it's a bad use of our time. But we're rounding the corner on assignment for week 2. So start working on that. You should already have started working on it. I mean, heck, we're at Thursday already. It's just modeling. It's not like, I mean, I taught you some tools on how to model a little smarter. It's still modeling though. You're still using the extrude tool, insert edge loop tool, and multi-cut to make shape and form. So that doesn't change. You can work on your week 2 assignments. Could have been working on them. We're going to build new assets, different assets. We are building 5 this week. If I remember right, it's 2 level 1s and 3 level 2s is the combination. So make sure you got that right. What I would say is best thing you can do is budget your time well. Try to make sure you've given yourself enough time, because those level 2 assets, they're going to take longer than the level 1s, okay? Those were pretty straightforward. There's some challenging level 1s, but most of them aren't too bad. You guys, a good percentage of you found the easier ones, I noticed. But level 2, they get harder, so it's going to take more than twice the time. So make sure you are giving yourself enough time to be successful. You don't want to wait until the last minute. And honestly, Monday is last minute. You know, that stuff, you should already be banging away on things now. So start banging them out. Start showing them to your teachers, whether you are in the local lab or whether you are in the digital. You should be showing us your work. I know sometimes it's like, well, I don't want to show anybody because, you know, I don't know what they're going to say, or I'm afraid they're going to tell me I got to do it again. But the reality is, you work in a field where you're going to get critiqued every day. So number 1, you got to get comfortable with being critiqued. That is the job. The difference is we are very understanding. We know that you're a beginner, and we are going to do our best to make you comfortable with our critique of your work. Whereas when you are working for someone else, they don't have to be careful with you. In fact, they're not even going to mention the stuff you did right. If you bring them your work, they're going to rip everything apart, whatever they don't like, and not gently. So you kind of have to get used to that idea that this is a feedback-driven field. You're going to get feedback, and it's going to be severe. So start growing your thick skin now. Get used to giving feedback and following through on that feedback, because one of the worst things you can do is go, and then not do it. That's a problem. That's a real problem in terms of your longevity in this field. So get used to the critiques and get used to making the adjustments that are asked for, because that's important. And, you know, honestly, you're going to do better. So you might as well get the feedback and do better, because you want to be better. That's the goal. This is not a field, you know, and honestly, I don't know what field is still like this, because it's madness, but this is not a field where you go to school, you get your diploma, and then you get a job. I think that happened in like the 60s and the 70s, maybe. But I know pretty much after that, there were not that many jobs, and it's highly competitive. And it only gets more so as we go forward. So it's not, I went to school, I passed, I got my paper, now I get a job. This field is going to require you to fight for the job you want. We give you the tools and the knowledge so that you're ready, so you can enter basically what is an arena, and you have to duke it out with everybody else who wants that job, and you have to win by defeating them and being chosen. So we're just giving you a chance to be successful. So I don't even want you guys to think, you know, I just want to pass. That's the worst perspective on this. I want to win is what you want to do. Does that make sense? The best you can do, not just pass. I'll try hard later, maybe. Try hard now, try hard all the time. I think in any instance, when I look back at my own life, in any instance where I did the best I could with whatever I was given, even if it wasn't like what I was the most excited about, more opportunity came my way as a result of that. Positive attitude in doing my best. What's the least I can do typically does not pay off well. Does that make sense? Especially in a competitive field. So just something to think about when the way you approach your classes and the way you approach your work. You're in it to win it, always. That's your best bet. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So just keep, you know, I don't know who it is who says you go to school, you get your paper, you get your job. I would like to choke them. That's not the way it works at all. And all too many people believe that. It is so wrong, so wrong. I wish somebody had told me, because I know it was a very uphill battle for me, because I did not know that. Any questions about today's material? We pretty good? We know what we want? We have what we need? Oh, sorry, the light is like, when I look over that direction, I am looking into oblivion, so I can't tell what's going on. Go ahead. No, you can't. That's a good question. You can have many children, but only one dad, and it can be proven by blood test. Does that make sense? That's a good question. But yes, you can't have more than one parent. Now you can have parents of parents, absolutely. Then you've got a chain of command or hierarchy. But you, again, the problem with having two parents of equal hierarchy is that could be conflicting instruction, which you can't do. Well, one thing is in charge of the others. There's always something that's in charge. Right. Ah, yes. So you must come up with a solution that works. Does that make sense? Therein lies the challenge of this discipline. You have to find the solution that works. But what's nice about this discipline, and what I like about it, is you test it. If it works, you did it. You know, it's not like, is the nose too big? You know, that arbitrary stuff. This is straightforward. If you move it and it moves right, you did it. So that's kind of a rewarding aspect of it. You can test it. So, but that's it. You got to figure out what's the solution. And oftentimes there's more than one. It's a good question though. I like that one. Sorry, I can't see over there. All right. Anything else? Are we good? All good? All right. Terrific. I will see you guys virtually on Saturday. We will meet at the 8 a.m. hour, so make sure, Eastern Standard Time, make sure you are there. Bring your great questions. Take notes as always. And again, get some feedback from your instructors, whether you're in lab right there with them, or whether you come to the Google Hangout and get some feedback there. Feedback is your best friend. You really want that whenever and wherever you can get it.
Google Hangout, not that.
Google Hangout is great. I mean, not only do you learn a lot there, but it's actually kind of fun. It's a little bit social as well, because you've got other people who are working too, and you kind of,
Chilling in there doing live on Saturday.
absolutely. And they're just, everybody's in there just kind of hanging out, doing their work. And it's like, oh, hey, does anybody remember how to freeze transformations? Oh yeah, go to modify, so it's like, rather than having to look stuff up or go back to your notes or, just ask. Sometimes somebody knows. And if you need an instructor to take a look, hey, can you watch what I'm doing? This is wacky, we're there. That's what we're doing. So come see us. It's actually fun. Oh, I'll take a look. All right, so thank you, everybody. I will see you virtually on Saturday. Have lots of fun. Build models like the wind. And we will talk on Saturday.